He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
Have you ever played a board game with somebody who's the only one in the room who's read the rules? My wife is one of those people, when you sit down to do a board game, the first thing she does is pull out the rule book. She wants to read all the rules the best she can before we get started. And if not, she'll keep it handy through the course of the game so she can look up a rule if she's unclear on it. But see, then there are games like, Uno, where the actual playing of the card tells you what the rule is. Reverse, flip, change the color, go to another wild card. You can play whatever color you want to. It's pretty fascinating, though, when you realize that oftentimes the games we play in business, in politics, in relationships, have rules that seem to be a little bit ambiguous. And when those rules are ambiguous, we tend to have people who, they feel like they can change the game by changing the rules in the middle of the game. It doesn't matter what the rules were that were stated when we started, what we thought was going to be fair, what we thought was going to be equal to everyone else. They can change the rules in the middle of the game, and so then the whole game changes, and the advantage you thought you had now becomes a disadvantage, or liabilities are turned on their head. It's no longer an asset, it's a liability, because the rules were changed in the middle of the game. Leaders are the culprit, both of defending our freedoms and threatening them. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I'm genuinely fascinated by people who feel like they've got to cheat to win. They've got to change the rules of a political race, for an example, of where voters come from, or how they get their votes in, or how long they can vote, or when they can vote and when they can't vote, and who can vote and who can't vote. And all those manipulations usually are an indication that the people, the candidate, the team who are making changes to the rules feel like if the rules stay the same, they're at a disadvantage. That's a scary, frightening thing to me, but it doesn't it doesn't just happen in politics. If you've ever tried to cash a check that was written by a client of yours, back in the day, say 10 years ago, if you didn't bank at the same bank, you could at least take their check to their bank and present it to their bank, and their bank would say, oh, yep, that's a client of ours, and that money is in the account, so let us give you the cash. That rule is not the same anymore. I recently had a client write me a check. My bank put a 10-day hold on the client check. Their excuse was, well, you have to get 5 to 7 checks from this client before we will release it within 24 hours. And I said, in the type of business that I'm in, the majority of my clients aren't returning clients. What I do for them, I do one time. They would have no reason to write me more than 2 checks, one for a deposit and one for the final balance. That's it. They usually don't pay me monthly. They don't pay me 6, 7, 8, 10 times as according to your policy. So I need the funds to be available now. We had a big brouhaha about it. They refused to do it. So I took the check and I went to the bank that the check was written on. the bank the check was written on said, if you don't have an account here, we can hold it for 7 days and you can come back for the cash. I said, well, is the check good? They said, oh yeah, there's plenty of money in the account to cover the check. I said, then why in the world can't you just cash the check? Guess what their answer was? Policy. Leaders who make the rules have the right to change them. Usually they change them to their own advantage, not to the advantage of the consumer or the player of the game or the participants in the game. No, they change them strictly to their own. They rewrite the rules. Leaders do that. Leaders are both the greatest defenders of our freedom and the greatest threats to them. If you're a leader, I challenge you to have better integrity than that. To not ask the question, how can this rule or what new rule would suit me best, but to ask every time you consider a new rule, a new bylaw, a new application of policy, how does this impact everybody else around me? One of the biggest things in the news cycle over the last year has been freedom of speech laws. Suppression is everywhere. And ask the number of candidates on both sides of the aisle who had popular or unpopular phrases in their campaigns that the largest search engine on earth decided for some reason their ad campaign was no longer valid. It wasn't that the bill was not paid. It wasn't that they said something offensive, but they said something that didn't agree with the leadership of that search engine. And so their ad campaign was shut down, which effectively shuts down their political campaign because something in their phraseology was unacceptable. Wasn't wrong, wasn't illegal, wasn't immoral, just wasn't exactly what I want to hear. See, the reality of our freedom of speech laws in the United States are that they're protected by the law for the purpose of allowing freedom to people we disagree with. That's a pretty significant difference than most nations. Most nations don't have a freedom of the press law. Most nations don't have a freedom of the speech law. They don't have the right to say whatever they feel, even if it offends you. Which is sadly where some people believe the U.S. should be. That if it hurts my feelings, you have to stop talking. If it hurts my feelings, you don't get to write it out. If it hurts my feelings, which might be different in an hour than they are right now, because I just haven't had my coffee yet, so I'm in a bad mood, so you hurt my feelings by saying something, there should be laws against that. That's the way some people think. Some people have the emotional drive that says, well, I'll be in a greater mood tomorrow or a week from now or 2 weeks from now or after I get $1 million from you. And so until then, you just can't say anything. Well, that's not the way freedom of speech is written. Freedom of speech says you have the right to have open thought, free ideas, and your freedom to express them is paramount. When we find certain groups of people, leaders in certain categories, who want to silence ideas and thoughts and expressions that they don't like, they're no different than the person who wants to throw extra rules on top of the Monopoly board game. Those who want to make up their own cards in Uno. Those who want to change the rules in the middle of the game in billiards. And they're everywhere. And I still conjecture that those who are determined to change the rules in the middle of the game are determined to do so because they realize if they play fair, they're going to lose. Their ideas are not strong enough to stand on their own, so they have to silence everybody else's. The words that they say are not articulate enough to persuade, and so they have to silence their opponent. And the only way to do that is to change the rules in the middle of the game. But see, these aren't just the average, everyday Joe kind of people who are about the business of this. No, to have the kind of influence it takes to change the rules, you've got to be a leader. It may not be a political leader. maybe a financial leader. It may be a leader of a foreign government. It may be a leader who operates big business on multiple continents and therefore has a lot of persuasive capital to make changes that benefit them, even if they don't benefit the people. There's an interesting phrase in the Founding Fathers' commentary about the United States. These United States are formed a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. Meaning the government that leads us, that makes our decisions, the government that decides what we're free to say and not to say, where we're free to worship or not to worship, what we're free to participate in or not participate in, isn't made by a ruling class of oligarchs or elitists. It's made by everyday people. We lead our own lives. We are the leaders. That's the way our government was structured. Not the way it's been operating the last several decades, but that's the way it was structured. A democratic republic, where we have representatives who speak for us, but they're supposed to speak what we've discussed together. It should be that we gather together with our local representatives, who then go on our behalf to the next level to discuss what we all discussed together, who then take that on to the next level until it ends up in our nation's capital. That's the way it's supposed to work. I heard someone say the other day, I thought it was kind of funny, he said, if you believe like XYZ and you believe that the government's not supposed to work, why do you volunteer for the HOA? Why would you even get involved in the HOA if you don't believe in government? I said, well, I think your notion about not believing in government is a misrepresentation of that particular way of thinking, number one. But number two, if you don't like the way it's working, you can't just run and put your head in the sand. You've got to get involved and make a change. And we see that on a lot of levels. We see that at the school board. We see that in the school district. We see that in the local politics of small towns and large cities. We see that at the government level of county commissioners and sheriffs. The first elected official most people can run for is dog catcher. Believe it or not, an elected position in many states in this union. But once you've won that election, now you can run for just about anything. You could run for mayor. You could run for city council. You run for county commission. You run for state board of education. You run for a state house of representatives or senator. And all of these opportunities are an opportunity for you to lead, to be a part of the rulemaking, the decision making, the freedom defending, or the freedom threatening. But it is the place, it is the opportunity for your ideas to be heard. Leaders defend these freedoms. Leaders also threaten these freedoms on a regular basis, usually so that they can manipulate the rules for their own outcome. If you don't like it, though, you can't quit the game. You can't run away and stick your head in the sand. But you can run for office. You can grow the size of your business until it becomes an impact. You don't have to always be an entrepreneur who is living paycheck to paycheck or an employee of someone else's company following their rules and doing what they want. No, you have the right to build something bigger. I listened yesterday to an interview with a first-generation immigrant. Literally, in the 1960s, his family brought him here from a country that no longer exists. It's not on the map. The country was absorbed, dissolved, wiped out, overrun, changed into another country because of a particular political bent. It's ironic that those kinds of things still happen in our world today. But as he came to America in the early 60s, he basically had nothing. In fact, his dad was told, you don't have an education? Nope. You have a job? Nope. Do you have a career field? Nope. Well, you're going to have a really hard time in America. The son, though, is now a multi-millionaire, pushing the borders of billionaire, might actually be a billionaire. He's on the Shark Tank. a first-generation immigrant, now investing in other people's businesses. And when he was asked, what would you have done differently if you had a chance to do it all over again? His answer was simple, but profound. He said, the only reason I am not more successful than I am right now is because I didn't dream big enough. The only reason I'm not more successful than I am right now is because I didn't dream big enough. Robert Herjavec is the one who said that. First-generation immigrant, multimillionaire, pushing the bottom of billionaire if he's not already a billionaire. That's pretty significant. I want to ask you, though, how many opportunities have you had to dream bigger? How many times have you felt like your freedoms were being taken away and there was nothing you could do about it? How many times have you felt like the rules were being changed in the middle of the game and all you could do was surrender to the new rules? If a first-generation immigrant can come to this country with nothing and start over, the excuses about entitlement and privilege are a joke. Changing the rules to benefit the ruling class, to eliminate opportunity for those who are willing to fight and struggle and scrap until they get to the top, is a joke. If opportunity for someone who has nothing, who started out with nothing, who had no privilege when they got here, isn't real, then how do you explain Robert Herjavec? The reality is the rules are being changed right now to prevent you from following in his path. We need leaders to defend those freedoms. Are you dreaming big enough to be one of those leaders? Are you willing to step up and say, I'm not going to watch the greatest country in the world brought to the bottom by trying to make it look like countries who have failed policies, like the one that Robert came from that no longer exists because of the same kind of policies that college professors want us to use right now? That's a bad idea. Leaders both defend our freedoms and at the same time are the greatest threat to them. Which side will you be on as a leader? Will you influence the success of those around you by continuing to defend their freedoms? Or will you attack them to try to create a playing field that looks level for now, but really only benefits those who are rewriting the rules? No one rewrites the rules because they're fair. They rewrite the rules to get an advantage. As a leader, you should know that. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.
Thank you.